Hello, and welcome to the Implementing CDBG webinar series presented by the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. The Implementing CDBG web series was developed by CDFA to assist local governments and consultants understand the state and federal requirements of the Community Development Block Grant Program. You can download these PowerPoint slides for each webinar from the CDFA website. The topic for this module is CDBG Program Overview and National Objectives. My name is Kathleen Weissenberger, and I will be your trainer today. So let's get started. The CDFA Mission and Vision. CDFA envisions New Hampshire's future with economically and socially resilient communities that reflect and respect their natural surroundings and represent places where people want to live and work. CDFA invests in the people of New Hampshire by enabling its partners to make transformational and sustainable changes, by meeting the evolving needs of New Hampshire communities, by deploying a well-tuned, effective investment system which directly impacts local communities, and by taking an innovative and collaborative approach to development finance. CDFA created this web series to assist municipalities in the administration of the Community Development Block Grant Program. Over the course of the webinar series, we will be covering national objective, eligible activities, environmental review, labor standards, acquisition and relocation requirements, procurement requirements, financial management, and other grantee requirements. CDBG was created in 1974 as part of the Housing and Community Development Act. The CDBG program grew out of a consolidation of 8 categorical programs under which communities competed nationally for funds. This is part of the reason the CDBG program is so flexible in the type of activities that we can fund, because these 8 programs were combined to create one block grant program. So who are the players and what kind of language are we going to be using during this webinar series? To HUD, states are considered grantees. Grantees are also local units of government to the state of New Hampshire and CDFA. So if you think about it, CDFA is both a grantee and a grantor. HUD considers the local units of government or municipalities in New Hampshire sub-grantees, although again, to CDFA, you're considered the grantee. To both HUD and states, nonprofits that are working with municipalities are considered sub-recipients. The primary objective of the CDBG program is to provide decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expanding economic opportunities for predominantly low to moderate income communities or low to moderate income beneficiaries. There are 2 types of beneficiaries in the CDBG program: indirect beneficiaries and direct beneficiaries. An indirect beneficiary, just like it sounds, is someone who is indirectly benefiting from the project activity that was funded with CDBG. The direct beneficiaries are those people who are receiving a direct benefit from a CDBG investment. An indirect beneficiary might be people who live in a neighborhood or community that are receiving a grant from CDFA to do park improvements or water and sewer improvements. A direct beneficiary would be someone who was getting owner-occupied rehab. They were getting a lateral connection to the municipal water system. They're getting something directly from the CDBG program. The people that are eligible for CDBG program are only local units of government. States are only allowed to make a grant to units of general local government. That would be a city or a town or a county. A government, a local government that is a general local government. That means regional sewer districts and other taxing entities are not considered general local governments and are therefore not eligible for the CDBG program through the state of New Hampshire's CDBG program. The units of local government that are receiving funds may carry out activities directly, or they can provide funds to subrecipients, those nonprofit organizations that carry out activities for them. For example, a housing authority may carry out a housing rehab program on behalf of the local government. States can also only provide their money to the non-entitlement areas, which are areas of the state that are not considered a CDBG entitlement, who are not receiving funds directly from HUD. In New Hampshire, Manchester, Nashua, Portsmouth, Dover, and Rochester are all considered entitlements and receive their funds directly from HUD. Therefore, they're not able to apply to the New Hampshire CDFA Community Development Block Grant Program. The statutes and regulations for the CDBG program can be found in a variety of places. First, the Housing and Community Development Act. This is our statutory authority. This is the law that was created that created the CDBG program, and we find the majority of our requirements in statute in the Housing and Community Development Act. 24 CFR Part 570 is where the Community Development Block Grant is in the regulations. 24 CFR is where we find all HUD regulations. Part 570 is where we find the Community Development Block Grant. And Point 480 is where we find the regulations that are specific to the State and Small Cities program, such as the one CDFA runs. 2 CFR Part 200 is relatively new. This is the regulatory authority that oversees all federal grant programs and spells out financial management, audit, and procurement requirements. It is important to keep in mind that there are instances where there are more prescriptive requirements related to the CDBG program that are found in Part 570 and would be overriding or in addition to regulations that you find in Part 200. Most of the people that we're talking to today are grant administrators, people that are helping a local unit of government administer a CDBG grant that they received from CDFA. Those grant administrators might be municipal employees, they might be consulting grant administrators, they might be staff of regional planning commissions. When I use the term grant administrator today, we're going to be talking about any of those people that will be helping the local unit of government administer and be compliant with their CDBG grant. So the grant administrator has many roles and responsibilities. The first of which is management and oversight of the grant itself. The municipality, through your elected officials, are legally, financially, contractually, and programmatically responsible for the CDBG program. That cannot be passed on to a subrecipient or a consultant. The municipality itself, through the chief elected official or the authorized official who signs the grant agreement contract, are the ones that must ensure that everything is done correctly with your CDBG program. They will be responsible. The grant administrator is responsible for the day-to-day administrative management of the program or project, implementing the terms of the grant agreement, making sure that the national objective is met, making sure that all the compliance modules are being adhered to, making sure that contracts with third parties are being done in compliance with CDBG and their contract. And the grant administrator should be reporting to the municipality about the project on a regular basis, monitoring the budget, alerting the municipality if any problems should arise. If the grant administrator is staff of the municipality, this is obviously a little easier. But those consulting grant administrators and regional planning commission staff need to make sure that they're in a regular communication with the municipality about the program and project that's being implemented. Because again, The municipality, through their authorized official, are going to be legally responsible to the state of New Hampshire for that grant. And they want to make sure that they're being kept informed of the progress and oversight of that project or program. Financial management, typically carried out through a clerk, staff of the municipality. Grant administrators assist in the financial management in helping those local units of government set up their financial systems, their general ledger accounts to track CDBG appropriately and make sure that only eligible costs are being used for the CDBG funds. There are many compliance modules that we call cross-cutting compliance with the CDBG program that must be adhered to because CDBG is federal funding. There are certain personnel designations that are required: an environmental review officer, a labor standards administrator, uniform relocation, compliance oversight personnel, and contract compliance. These are most often the same person, the grant administrator, whether it's an internal staff person or a consulting grant administrator. They typically take on all of those roles. Project files are one of the biggest responsibilities of the grant administrator, making sure that you have an effective file system, making sure that you maintain all the documents that are required and you maintain them for the period of time after closeout as required. Project files are your only way to prove compliance. My favorite saying in CDBG is document, 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 because if you don't document it, you didn't do it. So everything you do with your CDBG grant, from grant agreement to closeout and monitoring, should have a file associated with it and all the documents relevant to that particular component. Procurement, all of your files for housing rehab, all of those things need to be kept and should be kept in an orderly fashion that when the state comes to monitor, they're able to see everything that you did with your CDBG funds and that everything met a national objective and eligible activity, which we'll be talking about in just a minute. So, what can you do with this CDBG money that we're talking about? CDBG uses the term fundability. In order for you to spend money on a project or a program, your activities must be fundable. This means that they must meet a national objective and an eligible activity, and these have to be determined at the time of application and award from CDFA. So the fundability test, I call that a two-part, two-tier test. Every activity must be eligible, which we will talk about in the next webinar. It must meet a national objective, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. And it must meet both of those tests at both the time of funding and at the time the project is completed and monitored by the state. When you talk about the eligible activities, we're talking about what kinds of things are you doing? Are you doing a rehab program? Are you doing a new public facility? And when we're talking about the national objective, we're talking about who is going to benefit from the activity that you're carrying out. What is the benefit of that program or project going to be? So let's get started with national objectives. There are 3 national objectives in the CDBG program: low to moderate income benefit, slum and blight, and urgent need. The first national objective is low to moderate income benefit, and you can meet the national objective of low to moderate income benefit in 4 ways: area benefit, limited clientele, housing, and jobs. You'll often hear these referred to as LMA, LMC, LMH, and LMJ. The low to moderate income benefit is the primary benefit of the CDBG program. 70% of the funds that the state receives from HUD for the CDBG program must be allocated for the use of low to moderate income benefit. This is why you'll see this is a priority in the method of distribution that CDFA puts out every year, because they must spend a minimum of 70% of their funds on this one national objective. So what does LMI mean? What is low to moderate income benefit? LMI is a person whose income for the family is at or below 80% of the county's median household income. So the LMI benefit is a test to determine if the number of people in the household principally benefit the LMI definition. So principally means 51% of indirect beneficiaries or 100% of direct beneficiaries. So what do I mean by that? To determine if an LMI person is in fact LMI, the total household or family income and the number of people in the family are combined and set at 80% of the median household income for a family of that size. This is all information that's published by HUD annually and provided to you by CDFA. Principally benefiting means we have to spend that 70% of our money on LMI benefit activity. And when we're determining an area benefit activity or a limited clientele activity, in order to prove that we met the national objective of LMI benefit, at least 51% of all indirect benefit activities have to meet the LMI household income, and 100% of direct beneficiaries must be considered LMI. And we're going to talk about this in more detail as we go through each of the eligible activities and national objectives. So, as I mentioned, beneficiaries are measured either by persons or by households. An indirect beneficiary in those indirect type activities like public improvements, public facilities, sidewalks, those are 51% LMI benefit. That means that of all the people that are benefiting from that activity, at least 51% of them have to be persons who reside in an LMI family. A direct beneficiary is a person who is actually receiving a direct benefit from the CDBG program. Those would be things like having owner-occupied housing done, having lateral connections to municipal water, receiving down payment assistance as part of a home ownership program. LMI area benefit is our first way to meet the national objective of low to moderate income benefit. Meeting the LMI test by area benefit means asking a series of questions. What is the geographical area that's going to be served by the project or activity? Who are the people that are going to benefit from that project or activity in that particular area? What is the LMI income threshold for the area that's defined by the project? And then at least 51% of those beneficiaries, are they at or below 80% of the median household income? The area benefit is the most commonly used in the CDBG program. Activities that benefit residents of a particular area where at least 51% of them are LMI and primarily residential are projects or programs that would meet the LMI area benefit. This again would be something like water and sewer improvements that serve an entire project area that's defined by the users connected to the system. It could be a community or a neighborhood that will be benefiting by the improvements or installation of a park. And that can be documented in one of two ways, either by census data or by survey data. When you're proving your LMA status by census data, you need to make sure that the beneficiary area exactly matches the area that's defined by the census. For example, census data is provided by a census place, like a town or a city. It's also provided by census tract and block group. So in order to use the LMA census data to determine your eligibility under LMA, you would have to make sure that whoever the beneficiaries of your project are exactly meets the census definition. If you have a small city or town that has a municipal water system that benefits not only the people that are in the jurisdiction, the census place of the town, but also might include people out in the county that are not part of your census place, then you cannot use the census data for that particular jurisdiction because your service area does not exactly coincide with the census data. You can mix census data and survey data if it's clearly defined, and you will need to work with CDFA staff to make sure that it is being done correctly. HUD gets this data from the U.S. Census Bureau and annually from the American Community Survey and posts it on their website. Again, you must use the data that is provided by HUD, and CDFA keeps this information on their website each year when it's provided by HUD. You can also go to the HUD websites directly to get the information when it's posted, and you can find that on the HUD Exchange, both the census data, low to moderate income, which will give you the actual percentage for that census place, and the income limits that are required to meet the definition of low to moderate income. That at or below 80% is actually provided on the HUD website as the numerical dollar amount that a family must be at or below in order to qualify for low to moderate income. If you're going to prove your LMA status by survey, or we call it income survey, the survey must be done in compliance with the guidance provided by HUD. HUD recently issued CPD Notice 19-02 as updated guidance on how to conduct an income survey. You must follow this in order to achieve statistical validity, to tabulate your results, record all the data, keep it as part of your income survey file. And it is very important to know that you cannot round up to achieve 51% LMI benefit. This goes for census data as well. If a community is determined to be 50.9% LMI, either by census data or by income survey, they are not considered eligible for the CDBG program. You must be at least 51.0% LMI in order to qualify for the CDBG program. Service area that I talked about before is determined by the project or program that you're doing, and the municipality or their subrecipient will determine what that service area is. HUD will generally accept that service area if the state and the local determination seems reasonable. The key for you is to make sure that your service area is approved by CDFA and that they agree that the activity you're doing is serving the geographic area that you have determined. It does not have to be, as I mentioned before, exactly the same as any recognized boundaries of a jurisdiction or any census tract or block group. It must be determined by the activity that you're carrying out. The next national objective subgroup for low to moderate income benefit is limited clientele. Limited clientele requires that the project or activity is exclusively benefiting a subgroup of an area or a specific clientele that is being targeted with the project or the program and cannot benefit anyone else in order to qualify under limited clientele. The following 8 groups are considered presumed to be at least 51% low to moderate income by HUD. Abused children, battered spouses, elderly persons, severely disabled adults, homeless persons, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm workers. These groups of people, if a project is done specifically for one of these groups or more than one of these groups, but restricted to people that meet one of these categories, the project is presumed to be 51% low to moderate income and does not require any census data or income survey data to prove low to moderate income benefit. A couple things to keep in mind is that elderly, by HUD definition, must be a program or project that is targeting elderly as defined as 62 years old or older, and severely disabled adults must be a program or project that's targeting severely disabled adults that meet the definition of the U.S. Census Bureau. Disabled children are not considered a presumed group, and that's an important notation. There are other ways to meet the limited clientele subgroup of low to moderate income benefit and not be a presumed group. Some of those examples might be a learning center or a daycare or a healthcare clinic. Those could be limited clientele. They are targeting a specific population and not everyone within a geographic boundary. If you're doing a project that you believe is targeted to a subset of a geographic area and limited clientele is the correct national objective, but it is not for a presumed group, there are a few ways to meet the definition and document that you meet the limited clientele requirements. One way is to require income verification on the family size and income to show that at least 51% of the participants are low to moderate income. That might be a daycare or a healthcare facility where people who are utilizing the service come in, fill out an income verification form based on the size of their family, the number of people in their family, and the annual income, and whether they are above or below that low to moderate income level. Another way would be to have eligibility requirements that are limiting it to participants who have been income verified in another program or project and meet at or below that low to moderate income threshold. For example, you might have a program that is restricted to people that are receiving food assistance or the WIC program or Section 8 housing vouchers. Those people have already been income qualified, and if your project is restricting it to people who are in that other program, that, as long as it's documented, meets your national objective of limited clientele. The other use is to be of such a nature and location. This one is much less frequently used, but it could be something like a daycare or a learning center that is located at Section 8 project-based housing and is restricted to residents of that housing unit. The third way to meet the low to moderate income benefit is housing. LMI housing is any type of housing assistance utilizing CDBG, and you qualify your housing slightly different than you do all the other LMI national objective categories. When you're doing low to moderate income housing, you are not qualifying based on the number of people and the income of a family, but rather the number of people and the income of the housing unit or the household. But types of housing that's done with CDBG would be rehabilitation of housing. It could be multifamily housing or single housing. There are other LMI housing activities such as down payment assistance and closing costs for home ownership. Again, those are examples of eligible activities, which we're going to talk about in another module. When you're doing LMI housing as a national objective, there are a couple ways to meet the national objective. If you're doing multifamily housing projects, you must have at least 51% of the units that are rehabbed for affordable LMI qualified households. You must have affordable rents. CDBG does not dictate affordable rents. Those are dictated by the state and oftentimes in conjunction with their home program. If you're doing something like a duplex where there are only 2 units, you only have to meet 1 unit as LMI. The other unit does not have to be. But anything above that, 3 units, 2 must be LMI, 1 can be market rate. 4 and above, at least 51% of the units must be for affordable rents and have LMI households occupy them. If you're doing single-family housing is a direct benefit activity, and 100% of the occupants of those housing units must be LMI. If you're doing rental properties versus owner-occupied properties, they must have affordable rents associated for the period dictated by CDFA. Low to moderate income jobs is the last subcategory of the low to moderate income benefit. LMI jobs is when you're creating or retaining jobs that are going to be held or made available to persons who are low to moderate income. It's only used on CDBG economic development projects. You must count all the jobs created or retained as a result of the economic development project, and at least 51% of those must be low to moderate income. What that means is you can assist a business and do a project where 100 jobs will be created. 51 of those have to be low to moderate income. The concept of counting all jobs that are created or retained as a result of the economic development project means that you cannot provide assistance where a company is anticipating creating 100 jobs. And what they've really done was determined that if the cap for economic development in New Hampshire is $35,000 per job, they've decided that they need $350,000, so they're going to tell you they're creating 100 jobs. In reality, your $350,000 has helped them buy capital equipment. It's necessary for them to put on an entire third shift, which is actually 200 jobs. You must count all 200 jobs, and 51% of them have to be low to moderate income. You cannot arbitrarily stop counting jobs because you've met the anticipated number of jobs that were provided at application. If you're doing job retention, there are restrictions. If you're doing job retention, the current jobs must be 51% low to moderate income or expected to turn over within 2 years and be filled by or made available to low to moderate income persons. And there must be documentation to show that these jobs would have been lost without assistance. The regulations are very clear that there must be public notice of the CDBG assistance and the loss of jobs without the CDBG assistance. This can either be a public notice in the newspaper, a public notice at a public meeting, but it must be made available that without CDBG assistance, these jobs would be lost. This is why it is so uncommon to see CDBG used for job retention, because businesses are not willing to do that. Made available to is one of the things that are part of the LMI jobs criteria that can be a little bit confusing. When you're doing job creation with CDBG funds and you have to meet 51% taken by or made available of those jobs, you cannot use the made available to option on any job that has any type of special skill. You cannot have any kind of prerequisites for the job that might be hard for a low to moderate income person to be qualified for. And you must ensure that LMI persons are receiving first consideration for the filling of any jobs that are made available. This is something you need to work through with CDFA to make sure that you are meeting all of the requirements to make those jobs available to low to moderate income people. The jobs have to be of a nature that LMI persons would be able to take the jobs. So we're talking about high school education, low skilled, no skilled jobs. And you need to make sure that you are making those jobs available and that you're documenting how you're doing that. So if you're doing a job creation project, you need to speak with CDFA to make sure that you're meeting all of their requirements. There is something in the CDBG program called job presumption criteria. This is extremely rare in our CDBG state and small cities because it is not common to meet the requirements in our rural communities. But if you have a business that's locating within an empowerment zone or enterprise community or within a census tract or block group that has a poverty rate of at least 20% and is not part of a central business district, then a person that is filling the job that lives in that area can be presumed low to moderate income, or if the person that's filling the job lives in a census tract that has at least 70% LMI, they can be presumed. Again, this is rarely used in the state program, but it is an opportunity. If you think you can meet these requirements, make sure to reach out to your CDFA staff. The second national objective is the prevention or elimination of slum and blight. You can meet the slum and blight national objective in one of two ways: the area basis or the spot basis. The area basis has specific statutory and regulatory requirements that you must meet in order to be a slum and blight project in the CDBG program. You must have the area officially designated by the local government. That would be by resolution or ordinance. You would have to meet the state or local definition of blighted. So in New Hampshire, you must meet not only the federal definition in the CDBG program, but you also have to meet New Hampshire Statute 2051B. In addition, 25% of the properties in the area must meet at least one of the 5 blighting conditions, which we'll talk about in just a second, or public improvements throughout the area are in a general state of deterioration. So what does that mean? 25% of the properties experience one or more of these blighting conditions. It means that buildings within the designated area have physical deterioration, things like broken windows, bricks and mortar falling out, abandoned properties, chronic high occupancy turnover rates or high vacancy rates in your commercial and industrial buildings in the area, significant decline or abnormally low property values in comparison with other areas, and known or suspected environmental contamination. The important thing to note is that 25% of the properties must meet one or more of these conditions, but it does not require that they all meet the same condition. And keep in mind that it's 25% of the properties throughout the area meeting one or more of these conditions, or the public improvements in the area are in a state of general deterioration. That means sidewalks, streets, stormwater, sewer, your public improvements in the area are in a state of general deterioration. The spot determination under slum and blight, so the second way you can utilize the slum and blight national objective, is an individual building or property that is not located within an area that has been determined blighted. So let me say that again to make sure that it's clear. You cannot designate a specific spot, which would be a single building or a single parcel of land or property, as blighted if it is within an area that has already been designated as a blighted area. If it's outside of an area that's been designated, then you would do the same criteria to specifically by ordinance or resolution blight that spot. And then you may only do activities that are eliminating the specific conditions that are creating the blight and the physical decay or the environmental contamination. So you are limited in the activities that you can do in a spot national objective. Those are acquisition and relocation. If you do acquisition, it must be a precursor to another eligible activity. You can do clearance, and that is demolition and environmental remediation. You can relocate. You can take a property and relocate. You can do historic preservation, and you can do rehab of the buildings, but it's very important to understand that if you are utilizing the national objective of slum and blight spot basis, that rehab of buildings is limited to any conditions that are detrimental to the public health and safety. You cannot do general rehab, conversion of a building for another purpose, or things like that under the spot blight definition and national objective. The final national objective is urgent need. This is the most rarely used national objective in the CDBG program. This allows the use of CDBG without consideration of low to moderate income benefit or slum and blight. It's typically man-made or natural disasters that are causing threats to the health and safety of the community. And there are very specific statutory and regulatory requirements that must be met in order to use the urgent need national objective. The activities must alleviate emergency conditions. Typically, this is used when there has been a presidentially declared disaster that qualifies the use of this CDBG. The qualifying criteria, and you must meet all of these criteria in order to use the urgent need national objective, are that the existing condition poses a serious and immediate threat to the health or welfare of the community. The existing condition is recent or became recently urgent, and HUD uses 18 months as their standard guideline for recent under urgent need. The recipient, meaning the local unit of government and or the subrecipient, are unable to finance the activity on its own, and no other sources of funding are available. This is a statutory requirement. So there's not a lot of flexibility that can be made by CDFA for the use of urgent need. You must meet all of these criteria and be able to document that you have met all of these criteria. Keep in mind that this urgent need national objective is not the same thing as an emergency program in a method of distribution in the state of New Hampshire that is allowing funding outside of a normal funding time frame or competitive allocation, but still meeting a national objective of low to moderate income benefit or slum and blight. This is strictly if you are using the national objective of urgent need, which again is very, very rarely used. The 5 most important points that we've talked about today is the notion of fundability, that the project or activity that you're doing must meet the 2-tiered, 2-part test of meeting a national objective and an eligible activity at both the time of application and award and at the time of completion and monitoring. The second one is the beneficiaries. Who are we serving with our CDBG money, and the difference between a direct and indirect beneficiary and the percentage of LMI that must be served when you're utilizing low to moderate income benefit. The fact that The primary national objective of the CDBG program is low to moderate income benefit, and 70% of the funds must be used on the low to moderate income benefit national objective. What the different national objectives are: low to moderate income benefit with the 4 subcategories: low to moderate income area benefit, low to moderate income limited clientele, low to moderate income housing, and low to moderate income jobs. And how do you qualify or meet those national objectives? So that's all we have for today. If you have questions about the national objective or program overview, please contact CDFA at the information located on your screen. Again, these slides will be available on the CDFA website for you to print and keep for your convenience. Thank you for your attendance.